a show that covers what's going on in the North Shore and provides insight into our local villages and its representatives. Hi, I'm Elizabeth Johnson, and welcome to another segment of From the Source. This week, I'm lucky to have one of our village mayors as my special guest. The village of Plandome Heights is located in Manhasset, the 11030 zip code, just past the business district on Plandome Road. Here to speak about what is going on in this bucolic village is the mayor of Plandome Heights, Kenneth Riscica. Hello, Ken, and thank you for being on From the Source. Your background is in the financial industry, and you're a CPA with extensive background in financial services. You're also the CFO of a company. Tell me why you wanted to get involved in a village government.
Thanks for the question, Elizabeth, and it's great to be here with you. Thank you so much for inviting me. I moved into the village in 1998, and as a CPA, you get casual questions about getting involved all the time in organizations, and I had some of that. But back in 2007, 2008, the village taxes went up 75% in 1 year.
Wow.
And my residents approached me about the opportunity to bring my financial expertise to the village because there wasn't someone on the board that had that skill set. Good people, talented people, but not with that skill set. So I ran for office and joined the board at that point in time. At that point, the village had had 2 years of significant deficits, and my assessment was that there were a couple of things that needed to be done to put the village on a better footing. I wasn't mayor, but I was trustee, and what I suggested to the mayor and the board was that we had to eliminate the surpluses, the deficits rather, and turn them into surpluses.
Absolutely.
And we needed to improve our reporting. We had very poor budget to actual reporting. So every month as we got our actual results, we really didn't have context of whether we were ahead or behind budget, which limits your ability to react to change on a real-time basis. So we needed to improve our budget to actual reporting, and we needed a plan. We needed a plan beyond 1 year. Villages are required to put out a budget for 1 year in order to set their taxes, but we deal with capital issues that go far beyond 1 year, and we have to know what they are, what time period are they going to come ripe for action, and how are we going to fund them when they come ripe for action. So in the early period that I was involved as a trustee and then ending with when I became mayor, we developed a 10-year capital plan based on a report from our engineers of what our road needs would be over a 10-year period based on their condition. And those actions, budget to actual reporting, a discipline to have surplus instead of deficits, and working towards a 10-year capital plan and funding it in real time is probably the contribution that needed to be made at the time that I joined village government. And I'm very proud that we've been very successful with that.
Has the low rate environment helped you in your cause for the capital plan?
You know, actually, it's gone the other way because we have historically not bonded our capital needs. We typically have gotten grants, and we've gotten and we put money aside in our capital fund, and the money in our capital fund 10 years ago was earning 5 or 7% interest, and for the last 10 years it's been earning mostly zero. So since we have no debt, interest rates really did not hurt us, did not help us, and we earned less on our interest income, which we had to make up in taxes.
Okay. So speaking of grants, I know that you had received grants from New York State, and sometimes the government official who is in office does not get reelected. Has that impacted you in your capital plans, or has the transition been smooth? Because they are in office only for 2 years, and unless the job is under construction currently, I think that those monies evaporate sometimes.
Certainly, municipalities have that worry. The plan is that the grants are from the government, not from any specific person in the government.
Okay.
And our village has received grants from Democrats and Republicans over time. But I would say candidly that we have 2 grants pending. One that was put forward by Senator Martins, and one that was put forward by Senator Phillips, and we are following up on them now to see that they properly mature, and that is still an ongoing process at this point.
Okay. As mayor, you've been very efficient in maintaining the budget and keeping it under that 2% cap. Tell me how you've accomplished that.
Great question. Number one, we're as part of what we looked at going back 10 years and making changes to the financial process, we set the budget then at a level that we could sustain. And we set that budget 15% lower than it had been previously. We had settled some litigation matters that were consuming money. We had renegotiated some contracts at more favorable rates, sanitation, snow removal, stuff like that. And so we set the budget 10 years ago 15% lower than it had been. As we sit here today, we've only taken back about 10 or 12% of that. So our taxes today are still 3 to 6% lower than they were 10 years ago, which is really kind of an interesting feat. And how do we do that during that period? When we set the budget where we set it a while ago, we were able to go 3 years with no tax increase. And so we built up a little credit in our tax cap. And then we started increasing taxes within the tax cap. And how do we do it? We do it like a business person or a household does it. We look at it and we say, we make a commitment. This is what's available to us. We don't want to exceed this amount. How do we get to this amount? And that sometimes involves some tough choices. And the tough choices can include renegotiating or changing contractors or people. And we've been successful at doing that. The one thing that I won't do, though, I won't change the level of service. I may change the way we serve, but Plandome Heights is an upscale community. People expect a certain level of service, and we need to deliver that. If we needed to pierce the cap to maintain service, we would, but we haven't had to do that so far. Our people deserve a tight budget, a fair budget, but a level of service that's consistent with a community of our character and nature.
That's excellent. And that's why you're in this role and very successful at it. The upcoming reassessment of taxes by the Nassau County Executive is impacting numerous households. How is that affecting the village of Plandome Heights?
Well, let's get personal. My taxes are going to go up. I understand the issue well because when my taxes increased as much as they increased many years ago after the last reassessment, I began grieving my taxes like many people now do, because I didn't see the system was fair at that point, and I've been very successful grieving my taxes, and my taxes today personally are lower. So that's a personal story. So, you know, I expect I'm going to get a personal increase in the tax bill. But the way the assessment process works in the villages, we use the county's tax roll.
Right.
So whatever change happens with the county is going to be pushed down to the individual homes. So if your taxes at the county go up, the chances are your share of the village taxes are going to go up also. But to the village, what we do is we set the amount of the tax levy. The tax levy that we're going to levy for, you know, any individual year is set by our budget, and then that gets split to the homes based on the assessment. So if your assessment went up or down relative to your neighbors, you're going to get a larger slice of that pie. But to the village, we collect the same money, we just may collect it differently from people. And I'll be one of the people paying more.
You and many others. You make things happen. Earlier this year, you gathered the nearby village mayors to discuss issues that are near and dear to all the village's hearts with Assemblyman Anthony Durso. Tell us what you spoke about and what you accomplished in that meeting, because that's a big deal, getting all the mayors together.
Well, first let me speak about the mayors. Here in the peninsula, we have a lot of small villages. Plandome Heights is one of the smallest. Flower Hill is one of the largest. Sands Point is fairly large. And as a group of mayors, we get together periodically to share experiences, share resources, share stories in what we call a forum of equals. There's 5 mayors in the 5 villages in Manhasset. There's 4 mayors in the 4 villages in Port Washington, and we get together as a forum of equals. No one sets an agenda. No one chairs the meeting. We all walk into the meeting and check our egos at the door, and we talk about what's going on in our village. And as a result, we leverage the knowledge from one village across all villages. We in our village have taken specific actions that have come out of this consortium of mayors because of things I learned that other villages are doing and why they're doing it. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure the other mayors could say the same thing. So it's an enormous process of sharing information and resources. It creates a nice bond between the various mayors so that if one village has a resource that I don't have but I need, I feel very comfortable calling on them and trying to figure out a way how to access that resource. So you know, an important part of your question is that we do this regularly, and it's important, and it's how we leverage the knowledge. Cross-fertilize and leverage the knowledge, and it's how we leverage our voice. For example, when Executive Curran was elected, she comes from the South Shore. She comes from the, I believe, Baldwin or Belmore area. I think it's Baldwin. And we had a very specific discussion, and we said, you know, Laura won't know a thing about how we operate up here, which is much different than the South Shore, where they have large towns and few villages. And here we have you know, a large number of villages. So within 60 days of her swearing in, we invited her to a meeting of our 9 mayors. All 9 mayors were there, and we talked about common issues. And we began the process of having eyeball-to-eyeball relationship with the county executive. So we've done it with the county executive. We did it with Senator Kaplan when she got elected. We met in February or March of this year, just like we met with Tony Durso, just like we meet with the commander of the precinct, of the 6th precinct. To share stories and information and whatever. And the 9 villages on the peninsula represent about half the people. The other half would be in the unincorporated areas of the town. So it's helpful for us to speak with one voice when we speak to other people. In the Durso meeting, we talked about, there's a change in control of which party is in control of the legislature in New York, particularly the Senate, and there have been a number of changes of positions. And Tony has gotten assigned to the local government committee, which is a very important committee to us, and that committee is chaired by another Long Island assemblyman. So we spoke a lot about Tony's interest in getting closer with the local governments because he's on the committee that can help impact us. We spoke about grants, and we just kind of furthered our, again, eyeball-to-eyeball relationship. It was a very productive meeting, and Tony's a very warm person, good person to know.
Very much so. He was part of our council and has moved on to this role. Mm-hmm. With cellular service being so important to us, the next level of service is going from 4G to 5G. And that has its hazards, its pluses with it. How is that increase or going forward with this 5G service impacting the village of Plandome Heights?
Great question, very timely. People are very concerned about 5G. There is a body of thought that the science isn't that fully vetted. There are people that believe that. I'm not knowledgeable on the science, so I really can't comment on it, and I make no comment on it, but I can tell you that there are people very concerned about health and other effects of 5G. And what I do understand about 5G is that for it to be effective, there needs to be more of these cell nodes and closer proximity. So it means more people are going to have to deal with them, and people are very, very concerned about that. The federal government is acting in a way to limit the quote-unquote interference of local governments in the positioning of cell nodes, and so the federal laws leave very little room for a municipality to make changes to what a cell provider proposes. And to have any flexibility in that realm at all, there was a deadline of April 15th for municipalities to pass a law that mirrored their authorities under the federal law. So we had a public hearing on a local law to mirror the the federal law on 5G. That proposed village code probably contains things that we'd rather be stronger in our favor, but they wouldn't be legal federally. So we passed the law to comply with the federal law, so we would have the most latitude that we're allowed, and we did that before the deadline of April 15th. So, and if we hadn't done that, then the cell providers could just tell us what they're going to do, notify us, and act. At least now we can object. There's a process, and we can try to have an impact on how on where nodes are installed. So we've tried to stay current with what the current state of play is in the field, and we are current. And then there's the actual nodes that are being proposed. Probably for strategic and geographic reasons, we have not been asked to install any nodes in our village.
Interesting.
Our village is 1,900 feet long on Plandome Road, which is a high point, Plandome Heights, not Plandome
Right.
Oaks, Plandome Heights. So Plandome Road is a high point, and then we have to the water to the west of us and to the train to the east of us, sloping down. So it's only 1,900 feet. The lower parts are not really good places for cell nodes, except to service the lower parts. And I think that the cell companies have concluded, why negotiate with one more municipality if you can get the nodes around us? I'm just guessing. But to this point, we're prepared to act with the authority that we passed, consistent with the federal law, but we've not been asked for any cell nodes in our village. And I consider us very fortunate in that regard, because I know most of the other villages are in active discussions right now.
Right. Yes.
And pushing back.
I'm sure. But the service on the peninsula in certain areas is very weak.
Yes.
And you get no service.
Yes. Yes, I agree.
Speaking of the train, earlier this year, or last year, I think it was, the Webster Avenue train crossing, or the bridge, had been was scheduled for service, because it's been over 100 years, I think, in place. And so they diverted traffic, and they did whatever they needed to do. Tell me what was the impact on the area, and they haven't replaced that bridge like they had replaced the other one in town.
Let me tell you a little story as a way of explaining what's going on at the Webster Avenue Bridge. One Tuesday in December, I'm leaving my neighborhood and going over the Webster Avenue Bridge, and I see some Long Island Railroad trucks there, and the workmen are down below examining the bridge, and I keep going. I go to my client appointment and come back and whatever. The next day, I go to a different client appointment. I'm coming out at 3 o'clock, and I called into the clerk to check in, and she says, "Have you been in touch with the railroad?" I said, "No, I just left a client meeting. I haven't seen my email." I don't carry a smartphone, by the way, very deliberately. So I haven't seen my email. I'll see my email when I land. But why? What's going on with the railroad? So, well, they want to meet with you urgently. I put two and two together, and I said, they examined the bridge yesterday, and they want to meet with me urgently today. I better meet with them. So we met, I don't remember if it was later that day or first thing the next morning, with their engineers, with their municipal services people, and with some senior people. And they apologetically explained to me that they wanted to shut the bridge down, that the bridge is 120 years old, that they've lowered the tonnage rating down to the lowest level that a bridge can have and still be a bridge, and that it needs some repair and ultimately replacement, and they were expecting pushback on closing the bridge. And I was there with people from Flower Hill, who was also contacted, and from the town. And I looked at this senior person from the railroad, and I said, "Close the bridge." And he said, "Oh, you'll be all right with that?" I said, "You just told me the bridge isn't safe. Close the bridge, fix the bridge." So that was in December, right before the holidays. There was some concern, is it going to impact people's holidays and this, that, and the other thing? Close the bridge, fix the bridge. Public safety is number one. So they closed the bridge about a week or two later. Took a period of 6 weeks to repair the bridge. The plan was to repair it to a state that it would be sustainable for sustainable until they could get the capital approval to replace the bridge, because it needs to be replaced.
Right.
And that's going to probably take until 2024. I can't speak for them, but let's just say what I've heard from them is, certainly not before 2020 and probably more like 2024. So they fixed the bridge. A couple of weeks later, I saw same workman. Oh, before they reopened the bridge, the engineers working on the project called me about that obstruction. Mm-hmm. They said, you really have to restrict traffic to 3 tons or less. I said, well, if you watch, you'll see that nobody respects that weight limit and everybody travels over that. And so they concluded to watch it for a while, and when they saw a cement mixer driving over the truck, they decided that they needed to put a barrier that would prevent heavier trucks from passing. Again, they asked me my point of view, and I said, it'll be ugly, people will hate it, but it has to be done. I mean, I can't have school buses full of children following a cement truck over a bridge that's 120 years old and in need of replacement. I can't have that. Yeah. So that's how that resulted. A few weeks after that, I saw them there again, and they were there with the Department of Transportation. Mm-hmm. The Department of Transportation provided oversight over their repairs. Yeah. And the Department of Transportation concluded they needed to do more repairs for the bridge to continue to operate. Mm. And so they closed the bridge again about 3 weeks ago for 2 or 3 days and did more repairs. So I believe that the bridge is getting a lot of attention, and it's a safe bridge for the people to use at the right capacity at this time, but it ultimately needs to be replaced, and I believe it ultimately will be replaced. But that's the story behind it. It's been a little inconvenient. People in my neighborhood in the Bourndales didn't mind when it was closed because nobody was cutting through the neighborhood.
Exactly.
But that's a little side benefit for the people that live on that block. But in reality, that bridge needs to be at a certain level of safety for those of us that use it to drive over it. And it appears to be there now, and it needs to be replaced ultimately.
Thank you for coming on the show, Ken. It was a pleasure having you as my guest. Well, that's all we have for today, folks. Thank you for watching From the Source. Stay tuned for more in-depth interviews with members of your community.